Today, Meta is rolling out a new way to fact check on Instagram, Threads, and Facebook. They're going to start using community notes, the crowdsourced way of fact checking that's on Elon Musk's X. I'm Dave Lee, a Bloomberg Opinion columnist who covers tech. And when I heard this news earlier in the year, I had a question. Do community notes actually work? Well, thankfully, there is loads of data being published by X so we can analyze that question. I worked with my colleague Carolyn Silverman, who's a data journalist, and we sifted through 1.1 million examples of community notes on X to determine how often and how effectively they stop people spreading misinformation or just flat out lying. Here's what we found. If you use X, you'll have probably seen community notes appearing on some posts, especially Elon Musk's. These notes appear once enough people with differing views all agree that something is off with the post and that more context needs to be added. Designers of the system say that's a good way to make sure the note is fair and unbiased. But that doesn't actually happen very often. In our analysis, we found that fewer than 10% of submitted community notes ever end up being seen, and that's because too few people can agree that they're worthwhile. Even when an agreement is reached, it can be many hours after the initial post, and by that point, the damage is done. And sometimes these notes just disappear after they've been published because people pile on to disagree with what they said. So why is Meta adopting this model? I think it's because Meta knows that by using community notes, it can take the responsibility for fact-checking away from the company and instead put it onto its users. Mark Zuckerberg thinks crowdsourcing fact-checking will do a much better job. Now here's the thing, some studies do suggest that community notes, compared to the old fact-checking way, is actually seen as more trustworthy. And that's because many of us trust a stranger to point us in the direction of a fact rather than have a news organization come out and say something is just false. But then where do the facts for fact checks actually come from? We analyzed the links that were attached to successfully published community notes on X, and we found out the leading source of good information was the news media. Many of the links came from the same fact-checking organizations that Mark Zuckerberg has said he's no longer using because they were too politically biased. Community notes is great at fact-checking some things when they're obviously false or it's a clear hoax. But it's in the more nuanced topics where we get raging on social media that community notes begins to fall apart. It also doesn't help that at the same time, X, Meta, and other social networking companies offer good financial incentives to be as viral and engaging as possible. And influential people use misinformation to keep and gain power. Community notes is never going to be a match for that, whether it's on X, Facebook, or anywhere else with a large user base of people who are angry at each other.